Today we're moving on to page 3 of our notes packet. So we talked about transformations in general yesterday. So a transformation is moving the figure on the coordinate plane. We talked about the 3 different types of translations that we're going to be seeing, or transformations that we're going to be seeing. The first one was translations, which is when it slides the object. So if you don't remember what translation is and you have no idea what I'm talking about, go ahead and watch yesterday's notes because that's where I explain it all. Today, we're talking about reflections. So reflections are going to be our flips. So we're flipping an object over our line. A place where you've experienced this before is when you talked about lines of symmetry. A line of symmetry can be drawn through a figure so that one side of the figure is a mirror image of the other side. So how many are in these figures? So you can see that I've done this first one. I drew a line of symmetry right there because the left side is the same thing as the right side. And I can draw a line of symmetry right there because the top is the same as the bottom. I can't draw any other lines of symmetry. So I just have those two. So I would say that there are 2 lines of symmetry for this one. So go ahead and try the next 4 figures. And here are your answers. I know my lines aren't 100% perfect, so don't come for me, like I know. This S actually doesn't have any lines of symmetry. Wherever you would try to draw the line, it doesn't match up on either side. This next one, though, has 4. So the left side equals the right side, the top equals the bottom, but you can also do the diagonals for this one. The trapezoid has 1, and the heart has 1. So let's move on and actually talk about our lesson for the day, which is over reflections. So a reflection is a transformation that flips a figure over a line called the line of reflection. So we have our line of reflection, and like the name says, we are reflecting our figure over that line. So I've got a couple of examples for you down there. So I'm going to have to clear out my drawings and scroll down. So our first example is asking us to graph C, which is going to be -1, +2. So let's go ahead and graph that. -1, +2. And we have our point right here. And then our directions tell us that it's reflected over the x-axis. Okay, to be able to do this, I have to know my x from my y. Thankfully, this graph tells me. So this right here is our x-axis. I know that if I am standing in front of a mirror and I take one step back, my reflection is also going to be taking one step back. If I'm 2 feet away from my mirror, my reflection is 2 feet away. And so think of it like that. We have our line of reflection right here. Think of that as your mirror. And think of this as where you're standing. So you are 2 steps away from your mirror. Your reflection should be 2 steps away from the mirror. And so that would be the point. So let's go ahead and throw in our labels. So it was point C. So that was our original point. And this is our prime point. Now let's figure out what C prime actually is. So if I look, I know that that point is at -1, -2. And so that's what C prime is going to equal. The point -1, comma, -2. All right, let's try this next one. So we have point C again. It's the same point at -1, +2. So let's go ahead and graph that. But this time it's reflected over the y-axis. So that means that this vertical line is our mirror. We are standing 1 jump away from our mirror, so that means that our reflection should be standing 1 jump away from the mirror. And so our reflection is right there. And so we'll label this C because that was our original point. and this other one C prime, because that was our second point that we drew. Now we have to figure out what that point actually is. So I'm going to look at my graph, and I know that that point's at +1, +2. So that's what I'm going to write. +1, comma, +2. Okay, so what I want you to do now is to look at how the numbers in the point changed. This was flipping it over the x-axis, and this was flipping over to the y-axis. What stayed the same and what changed, and why do you think that is? Take a minute, pause the video, think about that question. Hopefully you had enough time to reflect. When we are dealing with the x-axis, we know that it stays on this x-axis. It stays at -1. It just gets flipped over. So the only thing that should change is our y, and that's what it's showing. Our x stays the same. It's both a -1. And the only thing that actually changes about our y is that it does the opposite sign. So we are at a +2, and now we're at a -2. So whenever you're dealing with the x-axis, you are going to change the y, and you're going to do the opposite number. So I would write out something that gives you a little bit of a reminder, maybe up here where I have my cursor. When we're working with the x-axis, I'm going to say it again. When we're working with the x-axis, the x stays the same. When we're when we're working with our y-axis, the y stays the same. And the only thing that changes about the other one is that it does the opposite sign. So when we're working with our x-axis, the x stays the same and do the opposite of y. When we're working with our y-axis, the y number stays the same, do the opposite of x. All right, let's go and do one more practice problem together. We are graphing the reflection of triangle ABC over the y-axis. So it's asking us to come up with the points for A, B, C. So that's what we're going to do first. So point A is at +1 for our x, and 1, 2, 3, +4 for our y. Let's look at point B. Point B is +4, +2. So +4, +2. And our point C is at +1, 2, +1. And so those are our points. We can go ahead and graph this, but I want us to make a prediction and try to just do the numbers. So I know that we are working with the y-axis, so the y stays the same. And so I know I'm going to have some number, comma, 4, because that 4 stays. And then we have to do the opposite of our x. So we've got a +1 there. We need a -1. So go ahead and try those next two problems. Pause the video. Hopefully you got the same points as me. So remember, the y stays the same, and we're doing the opposite of the x. And so let's go ahead and do all of our work. So we are done with that answer. That would be our answer. That's our final solution. But let's try to figure it out by using our graph. So we have our triangle ABC. If we're reflecting it over the y-axis, we have to count how far away our A, our B, and our C is from our y-axis. So A is 1 away, so we're going to go 1 away. Our B, we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Point C is 1, 2 away. So 1, 2 away. And now we have our points for our triangle. We can draw line. We should draw lines to connect those 3 points. We're going to make sure that we have labels. So this is going to be A prime. This right here goes with B, so it's going to be B prime. And this last point is C prime. And so if I'm just asking you to graph, you could just stop there. Most of the time I'm going to ask you for coordinates, so you would have to look at this graph and pull the coordinates out from there. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's go ahead and look at our homework for the day. So those were all of our notes. Now you have some reflection practice. So you're going to be reflecting over the y-axis, the x-axis, and then the x-axis. These 3 are just a point. You're going to flip point A in this one, flip point B in that one, and flip point C in that last one. Just like I said before, I'm asking you to write down the new coordinates. So make sure that you write down those new coordinates and then double check it with our little quicker method besides graphing. When you get down here, you are writing the coordinates for the following figure. On one graph, you're flipping over the x-axis. On the other graph, you're going to flip it over the y-axis. And you're going to write the new coordinates for each. So in these 3 boxes, you should have these original points from up in this graph. And then these points are from when you flipped it over the y-axis. This one, same deal, original points. And then when you flipped it over the y-axis. So that's it for today. Tomorrow we're going to be working on rotations, which is a little bit harder, but we'll make it through it. So if you have any questions, send me an email, please.